earlier. This is clearly the most recent. Chris and I have been doing this talk together, and it's an honor to work with Chris and Anthony Lewandowski and the crew at Google to talk about self-driving cars. And I want to start with something that came across my desk a couple of weeks ago by one unnamed Detroit company.
Hands-free driving. Cars that park themselves. An unmanned car driven by a search engine company. We've seen that movie. It ends with robots harvesting our bodies for energy. This is the all-new 2011 Dodge Charger, leader of the human resistance.
I feel if your research gets noticed by a company like GM, then or Dodge in this case, that at least gives me hope that there's opportunity for change. The second thing I want to tell you is a personal story. I got involved in this about a decade ago, so did Chris and so many others. And I have a personal reason why I got involved, which was when I was 18, my best friend died in a traffic accident. He was taking his dad's new car for a spin, made a little mistake, and within a split second he was basically dead. And it really worried me to think, why is that? Why do we accept this as a society? Why we can cry out about this, given that we lose more than 1 million people every year in traffic accidents worldwide, and it's the #1 cause of death for young people. There's really something strange about us just tolerating this. And as I was going around giving these talks about self-driving cars and making some progress, it so happened that our airman, who was summer, well remembers, Suban Gyala passed away last November as a result of a traffic accident. She was on her way to get us breakfast for a meeting with government agents where I was talking about self-driving cars. And again, this happened without any meaning, any cause, and I'm sure many of you have the same fate, that you've lost loved ones or friends or family, or maybe were affected yourself by traffic accidents. That's something I would love to change. And I think one of the missions that brings Chris and me together, and many others, is to really take this problem and fix it so we can save hundreds of thousands of lives every year. That's really our mission. Now, this all started many years ago, about 2003. And Chris is here to tell you the tale of the DARPA Grand Challenge that led to where we are today. Chris.
So the Grand Challenge for me started in Chile, actually. So I was down in Chile with a fantastic group of people working on a NASA robot to look for signs of life in the desert. And we spent a month down there this year. And at the time, the robot was driving 30 centimeters a second. That was pretty cool, driving 30 centimeters a second across the desert. It was basically just fast enough that the vultures were circling overhead and realizing we weren't dead. And so this was very exciting research at the time. My advisor came down and he said, we're going to go build a car to go drive across the desert in this thing called the DARPA Grand Challenge. I said, really? How fast? Well, we have to drive 300 miles in 6 hours across the desert. Sounds like fun. We should go do that. It turned out over time that the rules evolved and ended up being about 150 miles over 10 hours, but nonetheless, it was pretty exciting. As we attacked this problem, we started out by thinking about how do you build a vehicle that can actually traverse a desert? How can you get out there and drive at 50 miles an hour? We realized there was a lot of smart people in the world that built cars, and we were not them. So we went and we found a platform that we thought would survive. So we picked a Hummer. And then we realized, obviously a Hummer can't drive itself, so we had to put a lot of electronics in it so that we had enough computing on board to detect, perceive the world around it, and then control the vehicle in response to that. This is our vehicle. The parts that are kind of interesting in it is the giant electronics enclosure in the back there that's floating where the cab would normally be on the Hummer. We built that because at the time we thought it would have to drive literally cross country, hitting boulders and rocks, and we wanted to make sure the electronics and computers would survive inside. On the roof, you see kind of the giant eyeball up there. And this was really one of the kind of big electromechanical innovations we came up with for the challenge. The idea with that was to take a single long-range laser that would allow us to perceive the world in front of the vehicle and point it stably as the Hummer was bouncing across country. So here's the sensor that we built, and one of the grad students who worked on it, Alex. You know, as you can see, we have a bottle of water on top of it. He's shaking the table, perhaps not as rigorously as the Hummer would shake it, and the sensor is staying kind of dead level. Obviously, we didn't have 100% confidence in it, given that the cap is still on the bottle, but it was still pretty exciting. One of the things that happened during the Grand Challenge, and kind of became a theme for a couple of years, was that we tested the vehicles incredibly hard. We went out and we pushed them. In this case, we had about 6 months from when we started working on it until the day that DARPA said we had to be in competition to have the vehicle run. And so we were pushing the vehicles day and night, and we were trying to get them to go as fast as we possibly could. And at times, we kind of overestimated the capability of the vehicle. In this case, we were testing at 50 miles an hour on this track. The vehicle went a little bit off the paved or the hardened dirt, got into a little bit of soft sand, and flipped over. I mentioned that stabilization system that we had on the vehicle, and it was a trooper. So here's the vehicle coming up the turn, flips, and you can see it's still trying to lift down the road. But it ended tragically. This was actually, for me, this was kind of a notable moment. This was the first time I got beat on the History Channel. Despite that, we ended up having a vehicle that got together for the first Grand Challenge. And we went and qualified along with a number of great other competitors. What was really exciting to me to see here was the diversity of platforms, the diversity of ideas of how to solve it. This is an entry from Israel, from Elbit. Nice little car, lots of suspension. Fall behind us, so it didn't get the close we did. This is Caltech's amazing entry. This is a great story of the Silicon Valley company that makes speakers. They ended up deciding they could build a self-driving car, and they ended up making a sensor we use on almost all our vehicles today. This is a bathtub with wheels. Great entry from a company called Esco. And of course, the entries come in all shapes and sizes. This one I had my wife and kids move out of the grandstand for when they launched it, knowing robotics and knowing how much mass was there. The vehicles got out on the course. They drove around for a bit. The last vehicle to enter. And we're discussing whether we should get them to go. So this is Anthony Lewandowski. He's one of the guys with us at Google, incredibly innovative. You know, we thought the Grand Challenge was hard, right? We get a Hummer or a vehicle to drive across the desert. He said, no, that's not hard enough. Let's make a motorbike drive across the desert. So, you know, it was exciting. So, lots of dramatic music. The vehicles leave. Very exciting stuff. 7 miles later, we get this. That's a Hummer. Not quite on fire. This is the Elbit vehicle. Sadly, high center on the side of the road. There's us again. Smoke, fire, disaster. So we drove about 7 miles of the 175-mile course that day. And we drove it quickly. We didn't drive it that well in retrospect. At the time, we were pretty excited. We hit a couple of fence posts. But we set kind of a new threshold for distance and speed, if not, you know, quality. And then, you know, a couple of years later, we got around to the Urban Challenge, where we had vehicles driving in traffic.
So I saw this, and ambitious as I am, I said, we can do better than that. We can do 8 miles. And the very first thing is I went to Chris's advisor and said, Red, can I work for you and help you with the software? And Red said, thank you, no. And then I decided, well, if I can't do this, then I have to start my own team. So Mike Montemello was instrumental at Stanford, and we had to start a team. Now, we had no money. So what do you do as a college professor? Rather than hiring your staff, you teach a class, and you do this for course credit. So we launched a class at Stanford. The first 40 students that showed up, 20 stayed. I debate to the present day which of the 20 was smarter, the ones that stayed or left. But they would then spend the next 2 months building a car with us and giving up all their other activities in the pursuit of doing this. The car we built looked more like sticker on it. It had all the same sensor equipment as Chris's car had before, GPS, inertial measurement units for angle localization, lasers, radars, and cameras for understanding the environment. But our approach was very software focused at the time. Early on in the game, we tested at Stanford. This is the top of the medical parking garage. It used to be full of doctors and nurses parking there. And when they picked up their car, they saw us doing experiments and they asked what it was all about. We told them. So very quickly this garage was completely empty and no one parked there anymore. We practiced with little paper box obstacles first and then moved into the desert. This is now several months feet forward, where our car now goes through the Mexican Sonoran Desert, driving at a proud 35 or so miles per hour, a little bit slower than Carnegie Mellon did at the time, but still pretty fast, doing dry riverbeds, steep descents, complicated roads, and being, most of all, environmentally friendly. You couldn't tell the difference between a small shrub and a rock, as you can see. On the science side, before I come to science, we had our set of incidents too. We always had a person inside the car, so flipping cars was not an option for us. But this is the day the New York Times visited. That's the picture that they took, not us, of driving off the road. And we got the New York Times people to help us push the car out of the mud. Now, just for your amusement, we weren't the only ones. Chris gave me permission to show the next picture. He said it was kind of a theme, his team. That was, I think, 10 days before the race.
That was 10 days.
And this car was done, ready to race 10 days later. And then Anthony Lewandowski, with his motorcycle, again on the day the New York Times visited him, at this incident. As you can tell, building robots at this time is a lot of fun. Few words on the science side. This is the picture that we made, but I think Carnegie Mellon would have an equal visualization of the terrain ahead using laser rangefinders as the primary modality. The beauty of those is they give you a full 3D model of the terrain. You can see it here in different colors. There's different SIG laser rangefinders angled at different angles, measuring the road up to 25 meters ahead. That allows you to find drivable terrain. So at the time, the name of the game was just find something to drive on that's safe. And that was already hard enough. To extend it further out to longer ranges than 25 meters and to go faster, we employed machine learning heavily. In this case, in form of a computer vision method that learned from the short-term laser to label, understand the colors and texture of the terrain that's drivable, and then using the camera image to extrapolate the same kind of stuff all the way to the horizon. I think it was an intelligent flood filter algorithm. But it allowed us during the race to adapt to the visual conditions and really see the road all the way to the horizon, 200 meters or more, and go faster. In the end, we went about 38 miles per hour. Now, this is the very short video of the race itself, which is now a couple of years ago. We were in second pole position. Carnegie Mellon was first and third. We had a staggered start, and the vehicle was empty. Behind it was a human-driven chase vehicle by the government that would actually stop it in case of an emergency. About 100 miles into the race, Carnegie Mellon just flipped, and we built a vehicle. Came to a stop, or was stopped manually because we were faster, we were allowed to pass it, took the lead in the race, then descended through really complicated terrain. This is terrain that is somewhat easy to drive for a human, but for a robot, really hard to drive. Any wrong decision, any decision is like a death decision, so if you go far to the left, you just fall on the cliff, and far to the right, you run into the mountain. Covered in dust, the robot came back, we went all outside to receive our robots. We had first the helicopters, then we saw a dust cloud, and we blew out, and eventually the unbelievable happened. A robot had finished the Grand Challenge. After 6 hours, 54 minutes, 132 miles, a robot that we built came back on its own from this grueling desert race. It was a really big day for all of us, every single team that was there. Thank you. Now, the tragic part is that was led to the robot's retirement. Was retired in the National Museum of American History in the mall in Washington, D.C. And the picture of positioning the robot in the museum is tragically and sadly reminiscent of an earlier picture that you've taken. Now, at this point in the talk, I usually skip the urban challenge, but since Chris is here, we have to talk about it.
So the guys from Stanford might have won the Grand Challenge, but we got the movie poster, And we got a cameo appearance as a time machine in a Denzel Washington movie, so I don't know who won that really. So the Urban Challenge was the next kind of generation of the dark web competitions. They said, that's great, you can drive through the desert, but it turns out that most driving doesn't kind of begin and end in the desert. You actually need to get places on either end of those. So they came up with a competition to have these vehicles drive themselves for 60 miles through a city with simulated traffic. People will go out, professional drivers go out, drive their cars in the city. We shouldn't bump into them. We should stay on our side of the road. We should be able to park. This is kind of the most compelling kind of pre-test for the challenge. This was the idea here. We call this the robot collider. You had to go out, come to a stop sign here, wait until these 11 vehicles that are swirling around this 350-meter long track leave a gap for you, pull out across traffic, do a half circuit, and then turn back in. And they scored this two ways. They scored it by how many laps did you do, and how many times did the human drivers honk at you. And so, we kind of tuned ours originally for Pittsburgh driving. And so it turned out the first time we went out, we didn't bump into anyone. We did an awful lot of laps, but we got honked at a fair bit. So we ended up having to back that off a little bit. And here you're seeing it be a little more sedate as it's waiting for a nice big gap before making the left turn. Of course, we'd done an awful lot of practice before this. We had our own little version of Stanley that we'd roll in intersections and see how it went. So we were quite ready for the NQE. At the end of the qualification that happened for this urban challenge, there was 15 teams that made it. They'd been through situations where they had to drive through what we call the robot collider. They had to drive through an empty city. They had to be able to deal with roadblocks and turn around and come back. So it was pretty exciting that anybody got this far. We had, again, a whole variety of shapes and forms, everything from the giant, not quite as big anymore, Terramax vehicle on the end, to little junior out there, boss, and the rest of them. It was very exciting. For us, it was pretty scary. So we had gone through qualification. We did pretty well at that. We ended up earning the pole position. We went through practice launches the day before. Some other folks had trouble. Ours just launched. This morning we go up and we run through all our checklists. The vehicle's ready to go. And then my software lead on the team comes up to me and says, we can't launch. GPS is busted. What GPS is busted? We have redundancy. We checked it. It worked. No, it's broken now. So we spent about 5 minutes running around trying to figure out what happened. I had the dubious distinction of going and telling the director of DARPA, no, hang on, don't start your event that you've been waiting for 3 years or 2 years. We're broken. Anyway, we tried different units in. We came back. We ended up chatting with Tony Tether and realized that one thing that had changed was they turned on a Jumbotron. Turned out, Tony went and got the guys to turn off the Jumbotron after a lot of feet shuffling. GPS started working again, and our vehicle was able to launch and drive around that day. So the moral of this is don't do robotics in giant stadiums with Jumbotrons. The vehicles that day had to go out and drive 60 miles. This is a scene from that our vehicle encountered, which is a little atypical in normal driving. So there's a robot on the left waiting graciously at the stop sign. Behind that person in the right lane is the DARPA official who can stop and kill that robot in case anything untoward happens. But then on the right-hand side here, on the left lane, which is the direction our vehicle wants to go, there's another robot there who has decided that the chase car vehicle in front of it was just dead on the road, very intelligently decided to pull out and pass it, but then realized there wasn't room to pull back in, and so now it's stuck. And to complicate matters, that guy on the left there, the chase car, has decided that, well, I need to stick with my robot, so it's kind of inched up and competing with the robot for the gap. So boss comes up to the situation and says, I want none of that. Nope. So it comes up to the situation, it's expecting the vehicle across from it to go. It realizes eventually here that vehicle is just not taking its turn. It realizes it can't go straight here, and so it replans, reroutes, and heads off in a safe direction, even though kind of if you followed the strict rules of the road, it shouldn't have progressed there. But its programming and its algorithms were robust enough to get past that. So as it turned out, we had some exciting moments that day, but our vehicle ended up completing the race a little quicker than some of the others. The really compelling factor that day was that 6 teams went out and drove the 60 miles through traffic with no one else on board. We were able to kind of step back and look at this and say this was a huge day for robotics again, that we could have vehicles drive by themselves in traffic for such a great distance. And of course, we won a $2 million check.